Well, we just do a cheers, will we?
Cheers.
You're very welcome to Paddy Scally's. Thank you for coming today. I have actually loved this. I'll taste it.
I did on the way in. You didn't know that, but I took a taste. Yeah, no, I wouldn't like that.
Okay. It's quite sweet though. It's nice.
That's much sweeter.
It's just for the aesthetics of the pint, because it's a mineral with Aubrey McCarthy. So you were telling me about Kildare. You're from Kildare.
From Kildare, from Punchestown. So right beside the racecourse. A lot of people would know Punchestown as being the national hunt home in Ireland.
Home of horses. The horsiest county.
The Irish Cheltenham.
Yeah, yeah. So what is it about Kildare? You're from Kildare, you grew up in Kildare, and you're still in Kildare. Tell me, why?
Okay, I would be fairly old-fashioned, as conservative in that I love having somewhere I can identify with. I'd live anywhere. I'd live in a tent, but provided the piece of land I put the tent on is mine. And so I know, even if I travel the world, in the back of my mind, I know I can always go back to my home place, which is Punchestown. And I always feel that the people that we work with who are vulnerable, women, men, who are homeless, in addiction, coming from care, a lot of them don't have that sense of identity. I think there's a whole PhD thesis in that. If you lose your sense of identity, you're sort of rudderless. So for me, I have a home, I have an identity, I can always go back there. Does that make sense?
Give me a broad overview of the people that you help. Like, I mean, Aubrey, you're very busy. What do you do all day? You're helping people all day. What do you do?
Well, the helping thing is not my business. My business is, I have a transport business. So if you're moving, we move you. So if you're going to Australia, New Zealand, Zimbabwe, we move you lock, stock and barrel, or Kildare, or Mullingar.
Do you move horses?
No, we've moved a few horses to Australia. Yeah. But so that's what my main business is. Then I also have a furniture business where we sell new furniture, and I have a restaurant as well in Kildare. So that's what keeps me busy. That's what earns my bread and butter. From that, I was brought up in a fairly chaotic environment, and from there, I had seen that addiction can ruin the home life. So when I made a few quid back in 2008, I said, I wonder, can we make a difference here? So I started to volunteer and help to try and help people that are in a vulnerable situation, whether that's addiction, homelessness, etc.
You have experienced some chaos in your background, which has kind of informed the type of person that you are. You've taken that and you've learned from it. You've built on it. It's contributed to this empathy, and it drives you to help. So you're one of these people who you work, you have your businesses, they pay the bills, and then the rest of the time you're helping people to achieve the things that you believe everybody should have an opportunity to go after.
You know, when I see people who would have come from a similar background to myself, I just go, how, if given the proper chances, the whole direction can change. Interesting, one of the younger people that I was working with recently, he was homeless, living in Dublin, and he was doing a certificate. We got him into a certificate in Closter Druidig in Coolock, and he was 21, and he was living on the streets. So we got him into the education. He was doing the education while he was still homeless. He failed his first year. I rang the lecturer with his permission. I just said, listen, can you please give him a second chance here? Because he's definitely living with adverse circumstances. She said, absolutely not. The same must apply to everybody. So I said, okay. That same guy, we got him into accommodation. We got him in part-time working in that. He's now on his second master's degree. He was recently congratulated by Simon Harris. It was all on RT News with a certificate of academic excellence for his first master's degree. So what troubles me is it's the same guy that failed a certificate, a level 5, and he's now getting an academic excellence award from the Minister for Higher Education. So all that has changed are the circumstances and supports.
So the challenges that you removed were? or that you helped remove were?
I think it's back to the identity. It's back to he's somewhere to call home. He also has all the therapies available to him, if he wants to avail of them through Tiglin. And so my whole point is that here's a guy, he's a failure. Here's another guy who's an academic excellence award winner in Ireland.
Two different guys.
Two different guys.
Two different environments.
Absolutely.
So you're a provider of environments.
Do you know, Albert Einstein, one of his famous quotes is, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a wall, it'll be stupid forever. And I notice the girls that we work with, they're defined by the standards that you and me have, because we've been brought up in a middle class, organised environment, let's say. Well, they never had the chance. And even our new facility down in Nace, which I'm skipping onto, that is for young people coming out of care. These people have never had the environment where you have to do your homework between 5 and 8, and then you get your supper, and then you go to bed, you wash your teeth. They never had that.
Yes.
So as a 5-year-old...
And your lunch will be in your school bag.
Yeah,
and your bus money.
Absolutely. So you're dealing with people who have come from chaos, and they're in chaos, and you're trying to give them an opportunity to exit that chaos.
Right. So let's break it down then into the different things you're involved in. Mm-hmm. Go on. We'll do a different podcast about the for-profits.
Okay. So, do you know, years ago, I used to go to church in Nace. And one day I was in Nace and they were all singing, and there was, help Joey the sinner and Mary, and get her to church and all that. I was thinking, the people they're singing about, they're not anywhere near reaching them. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I find we get holy, we have our religious beliefs, and we want our standards to be imposed on others, rather than meeting the people where they're at. One size fits all. Absolutely. Meet the people where they're at. And I remember I started reading while I was in school. For religion, you had to read the New Testament. And I started reading about Christ, right? And I was looking, he was with every wrong one that you could possibly find. Every prostitute, every alcoholic, every devil. And I just went,
oh, he's a devil.
That's interesting. He actually hung around with all the people that we're meant to be reaching. And they were his friends, and they were his colleagues, and all the rest. So I just thought, there's something wrong. The church model is holy. You and me aren't holy. The church is good for good people. It's not good for bad people.
It's one size fits all. It's like HRT.
Absolutely. Well, I've never been on that. But interesting. So what I did was, I said, okay, I'm going to make a deal here. Instead of going to church, I'm going to volunteer with the homeless. Okay?
Yeah.
So I got in touch. I Googled, and I got in touch with I went on a phone directory because it was early stages of Google. Yeah. And I got in touch with Salvation Army. They had a homeless hostel in O'Connell Street called Cedar House. And I went up there. And every Sunday, instead of going to church, I'd go up there. And that was my church.
That was your church.
And I met all different people. And it fascinated me. Here are people that, heroin addicts. To me, heroin was, oh my God, they're going to knife me. Now I meet Tommy. Tommy was in a job, and his wife had an affair. He hit the drink. He ended up losing his house. He's on the street. Somebody offers him heroin. Now he's a heroin addict. So Tommy the heroin addict is not the bogeyman that I had thought heroin addicts would be. So a lot of the guys started to go into state-run rehabs, and they were 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So they'd come back to the homeless hostel, and they would be sober, brand new. And I thought, this is amazing. 2 weeks later, they're back on their uppers in chaos. Mm-hmm. And I thought there has to be more. So I went to New York, I went to Scotland, London, all the different rehab centres that I could find, and see what the models are and what works. And what I found was Whitchester House in the UK, and it was to do with a long program, a 9-month program. Mm-hmm. I thought, what's that about? So one of the first guys I worked with on the streets, he was on the streets for 14 years, living in a container, heroin addict. I got him into Whitchester House with Phil Thompson and myself. And today that guy works for the HSE, and he is married, has his kids and all the rest. And I'm just thinking, a program that offers longevity, all the therapies, an opportunity to change, that'll change people's lives, not a 4-week program.
Right, well then, what you're basically saying is people end up in addiction because of some trauma that has occurred to them. right? You mentioned the guy with the wife had an affair, whatever. So this was a trauma that he was trying to comfort himself with drinking, and then it progressed on to heroin, homelessness, addiction, and then the cycle continues.
Yes.
So what you're saying is the longer program allows you scope to deal with some of the traumas that have led to the addiction in the first place?
I would say if you go into a short-term program, you or me, and let's say we've been on gear, heroin, for quite a while, after 4 weeks, I'd suggest it's still in your system.
Yes.
Okay, never mind sorting out all the other issues in life. The psychologist at Tiglin, the place where we have set up a men's rehab, the psychologist said to me, it's like buying an old building. And a beautiful Georgian building looks well on the outside, it looks functional on the outside, but when you go down to the basement, there's a lot of damp. The roof is leaking and the sewerage, the septic tank doesn't work. In order to fix all those things, you have to take the whole thing back to its original form. You put up scaffolding, you take off every bit of plaster, and you go down to the foundations. And that's what you do with the individual. And that takes time. To do a Georgian house takes a year. To work with any individual, you have to take off the plaster, you have to, the foundations, all of that. With you, it might be there was no damp course put in. With me, there was the tiles are missing from the roof. So there is no one size fits all. That's it. That's it exactly. And you know, when you break it down like that, people are fixable if given the opportunity.
Yeah.
You know?
So what you do in the program then is you address some of the traumas, because I always remember the guy who used to be the governor of Mountjoy. What's his name?
I know, Lonergan.
Yeah, he said that people would walk out of 3 years in Mountjoy and they'd be clean for the 3 years. So in other words, you would think like if you were a smoker and you didn't smoke for 3 years, then you were cured of your addiction. But he said they walk out the door after 3 years of no drugs and the first thing they do is score. And I found that fascinating because it completely reshapes the way I think about addiction. You know, and what causes addiction, you know, because you would think it's gone out of your system. It's been 3 years. I'm no longer dependent on that.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not the case at all.
No. And you know, I know John Lonergan, he's a good supporter of Tiglin as well. But I have seen, I mean, people that struggle the most on the program, and they'll F and blind and they'll kick and they'll try to break every rule possible. They're the guys that'll make it. The guy who accepts it as the norm and goes through the program and there's no issues, I don't have hope for his recovery because he hasn't dealt with the key issues. And you know, what are the triggers? What is going to make him fall or her fall? And so
because they build up resilience.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Through the kicking.
And also, I noticed you can play a game. So on the streets, there's even an accent. If you look at the lads and they're using heroin, you know, you get a voice, and it's like a heroin voice. When you go into a rehab program, you actually become part of it and you start play acting and playing part of the game there. And so you nearly conform to the circumstances. So then when you leave that rehab...
That's a survival mechanism in itself.
And then you leave the rehab, they're no longer, you don't have the support, so you're back in wherever you came from. That's an issue. So therefore, everything drops and you're back and that's where you score.
So, and then you just go back into the other theatre.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so the ones who are fighting against it are probably the ones who are dealing with the deep-seated things that are leading them into addiction in the first place. Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's not easy, I'd say.
It's not, no. I mean, I would often try to get to know the guys and the girls on the programme, and I go up on a Sunday to the men's centre and I try to do the alternative at the women's centre. And there was one guy, for example, in the early days, and he was the East Coast's #1 criminal, okay? So I thought, oh God, this is a hard man. Okay, I want to meet him. I'll go for coffee and see why is he the #1 criminal. Not to find out what he did, but to find out why is he this awful man. So we sat down, we had coffee, and we got talking. And anyway, it turns out his father died when he was 5 years of age in a car accident. Himself and his sister were the only kids. He was the eldest, and his mother started to drink. Okay, so she used to come home, and she used to shout and scream and throw things around. So he used to wet the bed. Okay, so what she used to do is check if he wet the bed. if he wet the bed, she used to get him up out of bed and then rub his head around the inside of the toilet bowl, okay? And so he was obviously in chaos and traumatized. So what he used to do now, when the mum used to come in, he'd hear her coming in, he'd get into his school uniform, get his school bag, he'd jump out the bedroom window, and he'd walk around the village until school the next morning. Now you've got a guy who's Wicklow's, or the East Coast #1 criminal. You've got a 5-year-old kid, you know, who never had the chance. And so when you're in Tiglin, that's who you're dealing with, the 5-year-old kid who wet the bed. You're not dealing with the East Coast #1 criminal. And that's what people, they don't see that. But our therapists do, our staff do. And they're working with that guy to try and work and restore the relationship with his mom, but also to give him the confidence from 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
To evolve and progress past the 5-year-old trauma.
He's missed out on all of that. But if you ask me, why did he use gear? I think I'd use gear too.
To get out of your head.
Yeah. To escape.
To remove yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when I was doing my sort of research on you before this, before our pint, I noticed that on your LinkedIn picture, it's you and President Michael D. Higgins and a shovel. Now, what does that picture signify? What does it mean for Aubrey McCarthy?
To me, with the, since we set up the charity Tiglin, which was in 2008, and even doing that was crazy, I went to the AIB, and we got a loan, a mortgage for 110% to buy the National Mountaineering Centre. I mean, it was crazy. And if you remember, 2008 was when the tide was going out. The whole thing was about to collapse. Well, as the tide was going out, I got 110%. So if it wasn't at the height of it, I wouldn't have got the mortgage. And people say, but if you had waited a few months, you would have got it cheaper. But I wouldn't have got the mortgage. So
Governance was happening then.
So do you know, even I approached the charity board that we put together, and I said to them, I need an approval to buy the Mountaineering Centre. So I wasn't the chairman, and I think I was a consultant to the board at the time. And they said they'd have their meeting. So I went into Bewley's, and I met them, and I spoke to them. They said, you've 20 minutes or something. I spoke for 3 hours on what we need. We need a men's rehab, we need a women's rehab, we need this, that. I was on fire, I was passionate.
No bother to you.
Then they said, okay, we'll let you know tomorrow. So I had to let the auctioneer know, because I had told her, put it on hold until 11 o'clock the next day. My board came back to me the next day and they said, we've had to think about it and we feel no. The answer is no. And I thought, oh my God, I know this is right. I know it's correct to do. I can't do it on my own. So the auctioneer had to ring her at 11. So Phil was in the car with me. And so I rang her and she said, well, Aubrey, what's the decision? I said, yes, they've agreed unanimously. I'm going to go ahead. So I literally went along. Let's talk about faith. I got all the documents done up in the name of Tiglin and all the rest done. And I was just hoping I could get the board online. And over the next week or so, I went around each one of them and I said, guys, you're making a big mistake. And I said, if you don't do this, I'm going to do it. So they then came on board and we were able to buy it. So, and from there...
The shovel?
That
was the shovel.
That was the shovel. So from there, I will say President McAleese came up and opened the men's centre. President Higgins came up and opened the women's centre. And President Higgins comes from a care situation. Yeah. His own parents died when he was younger and he was placed into care with other family members. But he seems to get what we're about. And every time he comes and he does an opening or whatever, he always gets media attention. He will come out with some clangor, but it'll be well-meaning and it'll hit the target. And even...
yeah, he said there should be Tiglins all over Ireland.
There should be Tiglin, absolutely. Like to say that. And I'll get my Christmas card, I'll get my birthday card, I'll get everything from them, and Sabina and himself. And so, interestingly, they ask us up, we're going up in 2 weeks' time now, and they'll ask us to garden parties and the Christmas thing, and I will always bring somebody from the women's, somebody from the men's, and I'll always bring somebody that's homeless, and I'll get them in there, and...
they can make the connection between their support and the result.
Absolutely.
Very good.
I brought two guys, twin brothers, to one of the Christmas tree parties.
Yeah.
And they were living in the Phoenix, Jay and Alan. So they were living in the Phoenix Park, and they were homeless, and they'd no addiction, but they had trauma. And interesting, I brought them up to the president's house, and of course Sabina comes out and blah blah, and introduced, where do you live? They said, oh, we're neighbours. They were literally neighbours.
That's our bench.
Yeah, they were literally neighbours, and from that, Sabina took an interest in the guys. She got them into acting school. Things like that. You don't get that. It's unusual. But Tiglin has opened that door.
They're great guys.
They're fantastic.
Every time
guys.
I turn on social media, they're going back to do another master's or meeting some dignitary.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Spreading the story.
Absolutely, and they come from absolute poverty, and they'll tell you that themselves. But you mentioned, what's the photo? So the photo shows you've the head of the country, okay, and you've got a charity dealing with vulnerable people, and you've got me, who am I, only a businessman on my own, right? And putting all that together, for some reason it works.
So it's Aubrey, the shovel, and the head of the Irish state, right? I mean, we all love Michael D. Higgins. Like, he's from Galway. He lectured my mum and dad in UCG, so they love him as well. You know, he's into the arts. He's a poet. He's eloquent. You know, and politically he came up through Labour, didn't he?
Yes.
So are you affiliated with any particular?
No, and you have to be so careful because I work with all the political parties.
Yes.
So
if we were in America, it'd be bipartisan.
Absolutely.
But what are we? We're multi-partisan.
Yeah, I don't know what I am at this stage. But no, and I've worked with them all, and it's interesting. I ran for the Shannon last year, and different parties asked me to run.
Yes.
I went as an independent. But and it was a whole baptism of fire. I didn't know what I was doing. But it gives you an insight into the political field. And where it works for me is, recently I opened a new place. We purchased a new place in Greystones, and it was for women and people in trauma. But in order to get that over the line, I have to ring the Minister for Housing. I have to ring the Minister for Health. And you need to know how the political system works. Otherwise, it won't work. And so
you need to know what pieces of legislation are there, what grants are available, what are the barriers, what are the hurdles, and what are the supports that are in place. So you have to educate yourself about that. And it'll be different political affiliations in different positions. So I suppose where I'm going with that is, like, there is the ideology of Labour is about capitalism that gives back. Capitalism where profits are sort of ploughed back into the state to make it better for everybody that lives in it. Yeah? That's the ideology as far as I can tell, although they probably need a bit of help with their digital marketing, but that's another day's work.
That's your job.
But as far as I can make out from what they have on the internet, that's their ideology, even though it doesn't really state it anywhere in a succinct way. Just saying. But I love that ideology, and I love this notion that, because I'm an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, and we know that societies need entrepreneurs and businesses to make profits and employ people so that they have wages. And so that they can pay taxes and put that money back into the coffers of the state so that we can have roads and water and infrastructure and all the things. So that's why I asked you about Michael D. Higgins, because I love that ideology. But I also, where I'm going with this now is, with all the political parties that we have at the moment, it's not necessarily that you're a centrist. It's not necessarily that you're picking a lane that kind of navigates between them all. There must be one piece that resonates with all of them in what you're doing.
Tiffany, if you people often say to me, Aubrey, what called you to do what you're doing, and was there any motivating factor? If you see outside here an older woman crossing the road and she falls, okay, you don't look for political motivation. You don't look for what strategy do I follow or what's my call. You go over and you pick her up. And the people we deal with come from all walks, but they've fallen. So what we're trying to do is pick them up. And I think that resonates with, if you're Labour, if you're Fianna Fáil, if you're Sinn Féin or Fine Gael, you just go, okay, that's humanity at its very rawest form. And that's what we do. So I think in Ireland, addiction is close to every family. And certainly I'm no different. My family, was in chaos. And I believe that people can relate to that because they have an uncle, a brother, a sister, a mother, and they go, okay, I know what Aubrey's at. You might not agree with everything I do or say, but you know, at its very raw form, we're trying to get people back on track. And I don't care if I never meet these people again, provided they have had an opportunity for life turnaround.
I love that. So there's a commonality. This is not political. This is about helping people. So obviously...
People tried to politicize it.
Yes, I know.
I set up, this is interesting. I had 4 homeless guys coming onto the bus. They couldn't get a job. There was no CV. So I said, okay, I'll give you an apartment. Okay? Rent out the apartment. Give me rent and you guys Airbnb it. Okay? They started to do it and they did very well. Then I got them another one. I asked friends, another one. They had 14 apartments on Airbnb, making a fortune. Yeah. Okay? As in, and they got themselves apartment. For themselves. Yeah. They were doing it themselves. All the money went to the 4.
A salary for themselves.
Absolutely. So between 4 of them, then there was an article written about me, how I'm the Airbnb king, because they did it in my name. And I just go, come on, lads. And I tried to explain to the journalist, I said, come and meet the guys. They're actually homeless guys and that have done well. They're now living. No. So you can politicize that for your own agenda too.
Yes. What we're saying here is there's a number of reasons that people end up in homelessness and addiction, one or the other, or they're together and there's a cycle, okay? What are the main reasons that you see in your first-hand experience that people end up in these situations? And what can we be doing to mitigate some of these? Let's start with the reasons first and then we'll go to the mitigation.
I remember hearing about two guys. One was a millionaire and his brother was homeless, okay? And they interviewed them both and they were saying to the homeless guy, how come you ended up homeless? He says, because my parents were in addiction. They said to the guy, how come you ended up a millionaire? He said, because my parents were in addiction. So really what will turn and give me a direction might be different for you. People often say that you can see addictive genes in me. That's why I set up Tiglin. So the very passion.
You can see addictive genes in you.
Oh yeah.
And you don't even have a jar.
No. And it's interesting, but the same passion and drive that I have for Tiglin, others can turn and use for addiction, their own heroin or drink or whatever. So thank God that I'm using it in the right direction. But my point is, the very drive, the passion, can be turned around and go the wrong way. You look at Kurt Cobain, you look at a lot of the people, Amy Winehouse, amazing, intelligent geniuses. But they realize...
Delicate creatures,
and we're all delicate. You might be, you might come across all strong, as I mentioned about that East Coast #1 criminal. You're not, they're delicate. So my point is, the drive, the passion that they use for singing, creativity, art, that's the same drive you can use for the bottle, heroin or whatever. And if it crosses over, I rarely meet stupid people who are addicts.
Wow.
Rarely.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
Wow.
I meet the most amazing people, but they've gone down a wrong path. And if you can turn the ship, which takes time. Yeah. So you can't change the beginning, but you can change the end.
So let's talk about, so that's kind of, the raw materials that are inside us that lead us to whatever it is, addictions, whatever. But let's talk about us as a society and as a state. And what are the things that are maybe preventing people from going down a better path? Like we talked about care, children, young people going into care because of chaos in their family backgrounds. What could we be,
I think the solution is believing in the individual.
Yeah.
And just so a guy who has messed up so many times, he's kicked out of school and he's told you you're only a bitch. Believe in him and show actually, okay, you can't continue on like that, but we're going to surround you. We're going to offer you every support.
You're doing the lighthouse, which is feeding.
There we do. Well,
give me the 4. There's 4 of them, isn't there?
There's 7 now.
7 of them now. Okay. Well, you'll have to give us the elevator pitch for each one. So
we started off with the men's centre.
Yeah.
That has 30 men coming from addiction. Mainly heavy addictions, it's not chocolate, okay? And so you've got, because I know there are rehab centres for chocolate and I could do with going to one of them. Yeah, oh yes, there are. Oh yeah. Yeah, like the likes of the Priory and that deals with chocolate.
Chocolate addiction.
Yeah.
What are they putting in chocolate?
I don't know, but I mean, I could do with that one.
Yeah.
But then, so we've 30 men up there. Then we have British Bay, where we've 14 women on the seafront with its own private beach in British Bay, an amazing facility. And then for both of those, we learned that if you've got somebody coming from Drogheda who is using drugs, or Coolock who is using drugs, and then they get better and they get sober, and then you're going to send them back to Coolock or to Drogheda, you're sending them back to the very place that they got sick in. So if you're buying drugs off Tiffo next door, you're going to be moving back beside Tiffo. So what we've tried to do is we've offered housing after. And that has been a game changer, because now people have a year's accommodation when they finish the program overlooking the beach, either in Greystones or Arklow or British Bay. And you sort of go, oh, I'd love to live there.
Back to the identity, a place to call your own.
Yeah.
You walk in the door, it's yours. It's
yours.
a safe place.
Yeah, absolutely. With
supports.
And supports are vital.
With an ecosystem of support.
Absolutely.
That, you can, I suppose, take as you need.
Yeah.
Or as you feel.
And some people, with you might only need a month of supports. With me, it might take me 5 years to finally get it. And I see a pattern when, for example, the guys, they move down to Greystones. Oh, I'm getting out of here. I'm moving back home. So after a month or two, it's not too bad. After 5 months, I don't think I'll move home. I'm looking for a house around Wicklow. And you just go, that takes time. Now, I know that's the ideal scenario. That's the ideal ending. But it takes time to get there. Anyway, so then after that...
So that's how many... Okay,
that's the men's centre, women's centre. Then you have the transitional housing for men in Greystones. That's called Carrigeeden. So then recently we've transitional housing for women in Greystones. That's called Coolnagrania. Okay? And these are working a treat.
Women are particularly vulnerable.
Well, you see,
when I say particularly vulnerable,
it's a different type of
fertility,
recovery. But not only that, you lads go into a centre. They've got kids. When they're sober after 6 weeks, let's say, they still feel, no, we're going to get this, and they'll do the long program.
Yeah.
When Tiffany sobers after 6 weeks, where do you want to be? With your kids.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a huge gap there. So men don't have that. Now, interesting, as part of the program, we teach men that they have their rights, but with those rights come responsibilities. So you have rights to access your kids. But what does that bring with it?
You have to take care
of them. So that's a whole other part. We do family support,
and
that is huge. We go to courts to try and get kids back out of care with their parents, provided our psychologists saying it's time that we can do this. So that's the 4 centres. Then you have we have a house in Arklow for vulnerable adults, young adults. We have the new centre in Naas for young people coming out of care. That's 12 individual apartments. That's phenomenal. You were down at the opening of that.
Yeah.
And it's phenomenal because you're dealing with people who don't necessarily have addictions. Most of them don't. But they've got to kick up their arse from day one. And they've never had the opportunity.
So they've come either out of foster care or some kind of state
youth homelessness, I call it. Because before it was meant to be state care, and then some of them didn't. So I just said, okay.
Who pays for this?
Right. We do a lot of fundraising. The Kildare one, though, Kildare County Council really have got behind it. And that is huge. And interestingly enough...
And you have some corporate funders.
We have corporate funders as well. And they, people that you never would have thought. Even the Women's Centre in British Bay. Let me give you a story. This centre, we didn't have a women's centre. And this guy started to volunteer on the bus. And he was a neighbour of mine. And he started to come out. And he met a guy called Paul one night. And Paul was
the bus is another thing.
Yeah, but the bus is now Lighthouse, so there's a bit of a follow through. I'll tell you that now.
Yeah.
But anyway, he was volunteering, and he met this guy Paul, who was homeless. Paul was telling him, I was on gear for 12 years or something, and I was living in a school playground, and man, I found this fascinating. Wow, Aubrey, that's an amazing story. So he went back to work the next morning, and he rang me from work, and he says, Aubrey, I met your man Paul. He's doing an internship in one of the buildings I own. And he didn't know that the night before when he met him. And he just said, that's phenomenal. So he said, is there anything I can do for you? And I said, we've no women's centre. And he said, okay. So he bought a place in British Bay, okay? And it was big money, and I mean big, big money. And he said, I'll let you rent it, but it must be formal, okay? So we'll do a formal agreement. So we were there for 6 years, never charged €1 in rent. And I was just saying, Lord, keep this going. And after 6 years, he said to me, Aubrey, we noticed that you haven't been paying rent. I said, you never gave us a bill. I was thinking, I have to pay 6 years back.
I thought you did that on purpose.
Yeah. So we sat down. He said, Aubrey, we need to clean this up.
Yeah.
So I need your solicitor to talk to my solicitor. Do you know what I mean? So I wrote him a lovely email, just said how many lives he has changed by his input, blah, blah, blah. But it's wheezy on me. So his solicitor got in touch with my solicitor, and the following week, my solicitor rang and says, Aubrey, this guy is signing over the place to Tiglin. He signed over the place. So it didn't cost us a penny in rent or a penny to buy it. Now, that's not normal.
And do we want to give him a shout out?
No, he's highly
under the radar.
Highly under the radar. And nobody will ever know. And yes,
so that's true philanthropy, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where, your logo isn't appearing anywhere, sponsored by.
No, absolutely. Yeah. That's why the one in Nace now, there's logos, and I hate logos. But that's the way some people.
Well, for corporates, I suppose you want
to publicly.
They have shareholders, but you also want to publicly show people that you are giving back some of your profits. And it makes you feel better about consuming their products then.
True enough.
Because you feel like I'm voting with my euro for something a bit better.
But you look, my business is transport. And I was doing a place in Stephen's Green, actually, when you were working in Mac. And you were I had to meet this woman, and I walked into a boardroom, and this blonde bombshell is down the other end of the boardroom, and she's looking at me with dagger's eyes. That was you. That was our first. That was our first meeting, and so anyway, I started to ask the guys while you were doing up the building. I said, "Oh, and what are you doing with the old boardroom table? What are you doing with the desks?" And the head of I forget his name. He said, "Oh, you can have it." And I said, "Okay, I have a registered charity. I'll send you a letter." So I started to take kitchen tables, cookers, tiles, windows. So Paul McKenna, who is the owner, he'd heard about this Del boy, okay? He was confident. I'm flogging the stuff, okay? And I'm using the charity as a front. So he asked, through the foreman, could he come up and see the places? He wanted to catch me out, see where they were. He arrived up, and it was a rainy day, I remember. And he came in, and as you walk in, he sees the front doors are from Stephen's Green. He sees the windows, he sees the kitchen, he sees the floor tiles are from all of the buildings.
Was it 70? I can't remember which one it was.
76 or something.
Yeah.
And then the Baggot Street building you were doing as well,
yeah.
And all of that. Like literally the windows, Twitter, all of that. So literally the windows in Tiglin were from all of those sites, and the desks and the chairs and all the rest. And then at the same time, I was moving the Intercontinental Hotel, and they'd single beds. So all the guys have single beds from the Four Seasons it was. But interesting, Paul McKenna said he was sort of a bit shocked, and he sort of said, I had no idea. And the roof was leaking that day. And he said, what are you doing with the roof leaking? Why don't you get it fixed? I said, well, we're a charity, so we'll try and do something down the road. We'll get that done. He got all the roof redone. I didn't know this man. He did all of the fire. Now, when I say he, all of the suppliers that you had at the time got together. And they literally put Tiglin together. And it was amazing. So I'm just saying, I never went out to meet you or Paul McKenna, okay?
You never came looking for it.
I never did. And yet, you just saw a gap and you went, Paul went, oh, let's do this and this and this. Yeah. And so people's lives have been changed by our
we probably
meeting.
did milk it a bit.
Right?
Because I was doing the marketing at the time. So.
but I'm just saying, so what you did is you gave a facility for guys that can actually have an opportunity to change their lives, you know. So then we have the...
I remember you said at the time, you were like, Mac is rebuilding buildings and we're rebuilding people. Yeah, it was a lovely analogy.
Yeah. And I absolutely believe that. And I don't say that just to be... I'm not being coy. I'm saying that's exactly what we're doing, you know. And
okay, so that's number... How many have we done?
We've done four. But then you have the 5 Arklow, and then 6, the one in Nace, as I mentioned. Yeah. And then in the city centre, I'm the chair of D.C.M, okay? D.C.M is Dublin Christian Mission. It's been there for 185 years, okay? With the same board of directors. Anyway, so... anyway, over the last year, a couple of years, we've managed to put stuff in there, and it's fantastic. We have a homeless outreach, we have homeless accommodation, we have a social enterprise, we have youth, we have a whole lot of stuff going on. But the homeless outreach now, the new manager for that is a guy who used to be in the queue, Alan, as you mentioned. He used to be in the queue outside. And he applied for the job, and I was thinking, this is going to be awful now if he doesn't get that. Well, he got it, and he flew. And since he got the job, he has come back to me with ideas. He's doing a comedy night on a Thursday, cinema night on a Friday. He's got a barber night on a Wednesday, all this stuff. And I thought, this isn't going to work. We've queues going down the street in the nighttime. It's like the Sugar Club, except it's for the homeless.
And who pays for that?
We pay it all.
So you've got some state funding, do you?
State funding, not for the homeless.
Not for the homeless.
I tell you where we have state funding. We've 5 beds that are funded by the East Coast. Now we've 45 beds. And then we get some funding from South Inner City Drugs Task Force. They pay for a number of our staff, 3 or 4 staff or whatever. Phil would have the proper details on that. And then we get DSP, Department of Social Protection, whereby we're able to put guys on a community fund. So when they leave us, they're entitled to a job and we're able to get them a CV. So that's Department of Social Protection.
The reason I ask is because, as somebody who has always done sales and marketing all my life, I know that going out and meeting people, cap in hand, twisting the cap, going, can I have a few quid? Like that's not easy.
Do you know, the guy who gave us the Women's Centre, he said to me, Aubrey, how come you've known me for years?
You never asked
me for money. Yeah. And I said, it's not what I do. What I do is I bring Tiffany up and I say, Tiffany, meet Tommy, Decky, Peter, whoever it is. I said, this is what we do. Now, if Tiffany finds, I know where there's a minibus, that'd suit them. And so you bring to the table whatever you can bring, but I never ask.
The other thing you do is you never say no.
That's on a personal capacity.
I noticed, because I remember we were doing a strip out back in the Mac days of somewhere, and I had a load of desks. Oh. And I rang you and I said, we have a load of desks here, they're going to go on the skip, Aubrey. Can you do anything with them? Can you turn them into money that you can use? And you were like, yeah. And you sent up a lorry.
Do you know?
And 2 big men.
And I know where that is from. And do you know that at that time we weren't partnered with an educational institution, okay? So there was one of the guys we were working with, and he had to pay $3,500 for his college fees. He was homeless. We got him into accommodation, so he had $3,500 of a bill. We were able to sell those desks that you paid for his college education. And you just got to go. So I often think it's God-given. I'm not the holiest guy on the block, but I do feel the boss man is in charge, and I think I'm getting a call off Tiffany. It was all ordained. And so
that's why you never say no.
That's why I never say no, exactly.
Yeah, I really like that.
And it works. Yeah. And if
so you don't ask, but you never say no to things. When things come your way, you're open to them.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
In Buddhism, I think I think it's Buddhism, they talk about the bamboo shoot in the stream, going with the flow. Right. Not resisting.
So I'm like a bamboo shoot.
Like a bamboo shoot.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, all the different religions have different ways of explaining it.
Well, true enough.
Okay, so that was number 5.
Okay, no, it wasn't. You totally confused me. Yeah. You have the 4, Tiglin men's, Tiglin women's, Tiglin accommodation women's, Tiglin accommodation men's. That's 4.
Yeah.
Unionstown 5, Arklow 6. Then you've got 7, the homeless outreach in Dublin, and then 8 would be Chancery Place. Chancery Place is whereby we have a new social enterprise. It's called All Rise. And it's All Rise to do with the barristers. So it's right next door to the courthouse.
Very good.
And we have we've homeless accommodation there as well. So a lot going on. And then one thing we found was a lot of the guys don't have an education. Okay, a lot of them wouldn't have done their leaving cert and have left early because of chaos at home, as I mentioned to you in a number of cases. So we found education is key. So we partnered with SETU, Southeast Technological University. We connected with a guy there called Dr. Joe Collins. Now, you meet 100 academics. One of them will get it. Dr. Joe Collins, he got it. He was able to see what we wanted to do. Do you know, in 2023, we have 77 people in third level education, from homeless, from chaotic backgrounds, that are doing up to master's degrees this year. And you sort of go, that's not normal. Joe Collins put that together. Simon Harris gave us a grant at the start of this year for $833,000 to put people through college. So if Tiffany comes onto our program, whether you're homeless, whether you're Ukrainian, whatever, if you're under the Tiglin banner, we put you through college now, free of charge.
Okay, so that's 8.
then one thing we found was some guys aren't going to do the academic route. They maybe just don't want to, and they don't want to get into an apprenticeship. And so we found that they were sticking in Carrigeedon. So we said, what about setting up a social enterprise in order to get them back to work? Okay. So we set up a thing called Rise at the Cove. And this is a coffee shop in Greystones. And I said to Phil, listen, as long as it doesn't cost us a lot of money, you know, get the guys through and let's try and break even. The coffee shop is flying. The guys that have come in there and the girls that have come in there are doing so well. They're being poached by other coffee shops in the town now. So in Greystones, I'd say Tiglin has provided most of the people that are working in the coffee. Yeah. And so Rise at the Cove, we have a sauna there, we have the coffee shop, we bake all our own stuff, and then we sell it there. So that's amazing. And that's
Greystones is fabulous, isn't it?
Greystones is special.
It's very special.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, when I was down there visiting Carrigeedon, like the local people were just so friendly and nice to me.
Yeah.
I'm a stranger. They don't know who I am. They're like, hello. And
Yeah.
it's so
No,
nice.
it
Like
is
the Truman Show.
Yeah, no, it is. It's an unusual
Yeah.
setup. And they seem to buy what we do, and they love the guys, and
Yeah.
you know, and it works well.
The local community has bought into it. I'd say that's
But as well as that, I think you can identify. And a lot of they're seeing these young guys, and they're thinking, this could be my son, this could be my nephew. And, you know, now by the time you get to Greystones, you've been through the mill in a program that's 9 months long. So you're nearly blonde-haired and blue-eyed by the time you go down there. But it's good. It's a good standard. It's equipping the guys, it's educating the guys, and also equipping them for the workplace. See, the difficulty with Tiglin, I bought a place in the Wicklow Mountains, and it had on its gate a sign saying Tiglin.
Yeah.
I said, oh, that's lovely. People said, oh, you should change it to Four Seasons or something. I was thinking, listen, the name is there. It's Tiglin. So then,
Go with the flow.
Then we said, oh, we'll set up the women's centre. We call it Tiglin. Then the coffee Tiglin. So now if I say I'm going to meet you at Tiglin,
Yeah.
you know, so, but it's a good name.
Yes.
It's
What does it mean?
House of the Glen. So now other people say it means our house.
Yeah.
So one of those.
Lynn.
Yeah, Tiglin Glen, yeah.
Yeah, and then Lynn is also pool as well, isn't it?
Is it?
Like, yeah, because Dublin is Dove Lane,
Okay.
which is pool,
Oh.
black pool.
See, there's a big waterfall behind the men's centre. Maybe it's something to do with that, I don't know. Do you know, when we were buying the men's centre at Tiffany, the guy I mentioned earlier on, when I was in the Salvation Army, he was on the streets. We got him into Scotland. I brought him over for a weekend, Phil and myself, and we showed him what we were going to do. And he said, oh, wow, this is an amazing place. Now, there was no windows, doors. It was a kip. And our CEO, Phil Thompson, is a visionary. He's able to see this completed. I'm looking at it saying, oh, crap. But
It's a pile of stones.
It's a pile of stones.
Yeah.
So anyway, he came and he just said, Aubrey, this is the type of place that you could hide from the battle of drugs and addiction. I thought, okay, I'll go with that. He went back to Scotland to complete his programme, and he was on his he went on hunger strike over there and everything, because what the Brits did to us, like, he was nuts in addiction. But you should see this guy today. But anyway, he went back, and Phil and myself, maybe a week later, we walked behind the Tiglin Men's Centre. We walked down to the waterfall, which is a famous place, the Devil's Glen Waterfall. Yeah. And there's a number of granite plaques there for Seamus Heaney. And the one nearest the waterfall, it just says, "We will hide here away from the battle." And I just thought, it's interesting. Again, it's like your desk thing. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a pawn here. This is all going to happen. And I'm perhaps being used to make it happen. But there's a bigger thing at play here, you know. So, interesting.
Okay, now we have 20 minutes and we have to come out of here,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So I want to I have a question here. I'm going to give you an opportunity to answer it.
I didn't do it. No, go on.
Do you think state funds could be used more effectively to prevent the issues you are encountering every day in Irish society?
I think prevention and education are huge. You know, I want to get the people that I'm working with before they enter into addiction. There's different, research done on this. There's a whole lot of debates at the moment. The Citizens Assembly is certainly addressing a lot of that. I do think we are fixing the problem. I'm saying before the pipe starts to leak, make sure it's insulated, make sure there's washers on it, make sure everything is put into the initial build so that the thing doesn't leak. You're going to get some leakage, but you'll have much less leakage. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, don't put a bucket under the leak.
No.
Fix the hole in the roof.
Absolutely. Education prevention is huge. Yes. I think we're now dealing with...
education.
We're dealing with problems that perhaps are... a friend of mine, he was on heroin for years. He got off heroin. He's a friend of mine through homeless services. And a young guy. And he got off drugs. But he started to use what was legal. His heart blew. His heart burst. He was on head shop stuff. And so what was legal killed him. What was illegal didn't. So there's a whole lot of an educational piece there. And I do think there's a prevention piece that really needs to be invested in.
And that's a whole other podcast.
That's a whole other podcast.
Okay, last question then. We'll do, we've no drink left. I was going to do a cheers. Okay, so one last question then. If you had something that you could say to your younger self, your 15-year-old self, what would you say?
I have always loved, I was advised to go to a therapist because of my background. And so I went to this girl, and very nice, very professional. But I think she wanted me to cry. I don't do that too easy. But anyway, one thing she did, she summarized and she said, Aubrey, what you're trying to do, you're trying to fix the situation for younger Aubreys, okay? To prevent from what you went through, prevent that happening for them. I went, okay, maybe there's something in that. One thing I will say is Bob Dylan's song, and I often say this to guys, it says, to Ramona. Do you know that song?
Yeah.
It says, you have said many times that you're better than no one, and no one is better than you. But if you really believe it, you've nothing to win, and you've nothing to lose. And I always say to the guys, the girls that I deal with, you're as good as anybody out there. And I remember Lady Gaga, when she was interviewed, she said, I walked into a room and there was 100 people in it. Nobody believed in me, and then one did, and that made all the difference, and she became a star. Focus on the person who will believe in you, okay? From your side, I'm saying for you to believe in the individual, but for the person that's in chaos and that, look for that one person. Mm-hmm. That'll change your life.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the message that you would leave for anybody watching this as well. Mm-hmm. Find the one who'll believe.
Find the one who'll believe in you, but also believe in yourself. And, you know, if that takes looking in the mirror every day and just saying, I'm effing brilliant. You know, even if you don't believe it, against every fibre in your being, look at yourself and just, you're as good or as bad as anybody out there. Don't let anybody look down on you. And a lot of the people that I work with through Tiglin, a lot of them have social anxiety, absolute insecurity. They feel they're not as good. And I know even I'd bring guys out for a bite to eat after they finish the program or whatever, and they'd go in, they don't want to order because they've probably never eaten in a restaurant, they don't know what to. I said, I don't care if you put your feet on the table, you know, you're as good as anybody else in it.